Hey, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about two things. The main focus of this video is to talk about Jacob chapter 5, and this is the allegory of the olive tree. And there's a detail about it that I just really didn't know about, think about. Maybe I forgot about it, but it was pointed out in a video that I was watching. Okay, you might recognize this person. This is Hyrum Andrus, and he was a scholar. Actually, I'm not sure if he's still alive. This was in no, this was back in 1989. No, he's probably not alive anymore. But you know, there's this channel called Light and Truth, and they have a bunch of videos and recordings of Cleon Skousen, Hyrum Andrus, and I think maybe a few others. And so I was just listening through this one, and a couple really interesting things stood out. So one, we're going to talk about this observation about Jacob chapter 5 and how it may indicate that the second coming is upon us right now. And I'm talking about now, 2022. Like, it's like soon to be, within the next few years, if not sooner. And then just because he also mentioned this in this video, I wanted to take the opportunity to put him down on my tracker for the 10 lost tribes as a main group. And I'm actually going to just start with that. We'll touch on that and then we'll go to the main focus of the video. So in this video, he said he was definitely of the opinion that the 10 lost tribes are a main group. He talks about it in Jacob 5, arguing that so I guess I better start like this. If you're new to the church or you're not a member of the church, in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Jacob, chapter 5, this is an allegory of basically how the Lord, through time, has dealt with Israel. Okay, being compared to Israel, being compared to a natural olive tree that brought forth good fruit, but over time it started to become corrupt and bring forth bad fruit that wasn't good to be eaten. And so what happened is the master of the vineyard had to do things to try and preserve the good fruit and strengthen the tree, and it has to do with breaking off branches, right? Branches being compared to groups that left the main body of Israel. One such group is Lehi and his family that were brought to the Americas, and they're a branch. And there are other branches. In this video, he actually talks about, and I had never thought about this before, there are basically 4 branches that are talked about in the allegory. So if you are to match those up with individual groups, you would have, for example, you would have the Lehi and his family. You would also have the Mulekites, which he's saying would be like the third branch, which eventually in the story, as you read it, it no longer talks about them because they basically became merged, okay, with Lehi and his descendants. Okay, so it's like those two branches merged. But anyway, he talks about, I think it's the second branch, he said, was the 10 lost tribes. Now, where me and him would differ is that, yes, we know that there were other groups that were led away. We don't know how many, but I'm more of the opinion that there were groups that survived for a long time, all the way up until the time of Christ and probably after, but then through the course of history disappeared. And they were primarily in the north, in Europe, but they, different places throughout the world. So anyway, I'm not going to go over everything. I gave you the gist of what he was talking about. If you want to hear it from his own words, then I'll put this video in the description below. You can click on it and then go watch it. And I would recommend that you watch it. This is really good. So I put him down on my tracker. This is a tracker that I'm putting together to try and see if I can just kind of like see any patterns, because I had the hypothesis that it was the earlier church that, they talked about the 10 lost tribes being a main body, but that seems to have changed in more recent times. And I still maintain that position, but we're going to fill this out the best that we can and see what we can come up with. So far, we have a couple here. So the red stands for the idea that they are not a main group that are hidden to the world, that they've been primarily scattered to the north. And then we have in column B, the hidden group camp. So these are the two camps. And so you see these two here recently, 2006, Dallin H. Oaks, 2019, Reuben V. Aliot of the 70. We go down here. I went ahead and put in Hyrum L. Andrus, 1989. That's when this talk was given, 1989. Okay, so this is all in chronological order. So just pay attention to the colors here. And if you want to access this spreadsheet, it's in the description of every single video. It's a link to my Google Drive, and then you can access the spreadsheet. You can't change it, but you can view it. So we have two up here that are in the camp of not a main group. We have this one that is in favor of the idea of a main group. And then all the way back here in 1875, we have Orson Pratt that was talking explicitly that they were a main group. And he was thinking that they were somewhere up north in the polar region. So I want to keep track of where they believe they are. I haven't listened to the entire thing yet. It's taken me some time to get through this, but I didn't hear him say anything about where he thought they were. So I don't have a location for Hyrum Andrus. Okay, so that's that. All right. And there's more. There's more than I'm aware of. We're going to put them all down here. I can't wait till this thing is all the way full, as full as we can get it. Okay, so let's go to Jacob 5, and I'm going to show you the interesting thing that he pointed out, and then something clicked, and I was like, that is interesting. Oh, before that, going back to the 10 lost tribes, there is a theory that, okay, so there's different ideas of where they could be. That they could be somewhere just up in the north, somehow unknown to civilization. And it could be either in really large caverns, like subterranean caverns. People have put forth the hollow earth theory. Some people put them in like Siberia or Alaska or Canada, just in a hidden, probably like a cavern type area. Possibly Denmark. So you have that crowd, the hollow earth. You have some that believe that they were actually translated, and so they're in a group, but in a translated state. And then you have others that really start to go out there and believe that they're, they advanced in technology, and so they're in space, which I can't entertain that idea. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but okay. Now, when it comes to the translated group theory, I think that one might have to be shot down, and this is the reason why. In Jacob 5, verse 42, it says, "Behold, I knew that all the fruit of the vineyard, save it were these, had become corrupt. And now these which have once again brought forth have brought forth good fruit, have also become corrupted. And now all the trees of my vineyard are good for nothing, save it be to be hewn down and cast into fire." So, in other words, there was a point where the branches, they themselves ended up being corrupt. You'll remember that the first two, they were planted in not so good ground, undesirable places of the vineyard. But the first one prospered, and then the second one that was even in a worse area did even better. And then you have the fourth branch, which represents the Lehi's descendants, and basically it was half and half. You had half that were good fruit, half that were bad fruit, and of course that's referring to the Lamanites and the Nephites, and the Lamanites eventually extinguished the Nephites, right? And so it all became wild fruit. So if the 10 lost tribes as a main group had been translated, I don't think that in a translated state they would have become corrupt. Now, I'm no expert on the translated life. I don't know what it's like right now for Enoch in his city. I don't know if time is passing the same way for them as it is for us. I don't know. It's clear that they're still in mortality. If you're translated, you're still immortal. You're not resurrected yet. So I assume that you can still sin. But if you had been taken off the earth the same way that Enoch and Melchizedek and his people were taken, I don't think that they would become corrupt after that point. But you'll just have to put below what you think about that. Okay, now we're getting to the main focus of the video. At the very end, after all this happens, the natural branches are grafted back in. We get to verse, let's see. Let's start with 67. In the branches of the natural tree will I graft in again into the natural tree. So all these different branches of the house of Israel being grafted back in. And we know that that's been going on, at least as far as like the Lamanites go, right? We have the Native Americans and all their descendants in North and South America. They've been grafted in. And then many, many others, scattered Israel throughout the entire world. Okay, 68. And the branches of the natural tree will I graft into the natural branches of the tree, and thus will I bring them together again, that they shall bring forth the natural fruit, and they shall be one. Now, this right here, this is the first hint of what we're about to get into, that they shall be one. And I think that this is like a very intentional phrase right here in wording. And the bad shall be cast away, yea, even out of all the land of my vineyard. For behold, only this once will I prune my vineyard. So this obviously is referring to now. It's referring to this last dispensation. It's referring to the gathering of the wheat and the tares. In this case, wild fruit and natural fruit. Wild branches or branches with wild fruit, branches with natural fruit, or original branches. Okay, 70. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard sent his servant, and the servant went and did as the Lord had commanded him, and brought other servants, and they were few. And of course, this is probably, I think, referring to Joseph Smith. Yeah, look at this. The footnote, D&C 103:21. Verily, verily, I say unto you that my servant Joseph Smith Jr. is the man to whom I liken the servant to whom the Lord of the vineyard spake in the parable which I have given unto you. Oh, well, there you go. He's just flat out saying in Scripture, that's him. So the servant is Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith went and did as the Lord had commanded him and brought other servants, and they were few. And we know that that's been the case throughout this entire dispensation. And an interesting thing that President Nelson said when this was back when I was in the Madrid MTC 2004, he had come to the Madrid MTC along with President Hinckley and also Elder D. Todd Christofferson, although at that time he was not yet an apostle, but he was there. And at the time, Elder Nelson said that he never believed that the church would get very big. He just basically told us that, and I think that's the case. And it's not too hard to believe because that's what it says in the Scripture. It says it here, but it also in the New Testament, Christ talks about how few there be that find the straight and narrow path. So, anyway. 71, and the Lord of the vineyard said unto them, Go to and labor in the vineyard with your might, for behold, this is the last time that I will nourish my vineyard. For the end is nigh at hand, and the season speedily cometh. And if ye labor with your might with me, ye shall have joy in the fruit which I shall lay up unto myself against the time which will soon come. And we're going to find out what that time is, because it's actually there. I'll show you. 72. And it came to pass that the servants did go and labor with their mights, and the Lord of the vineyard labored also with them, and they did obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things. And there began to be the natural fruit again in the vineyard, and the natural branches began to grow and thrive exceedingly, and the wild branches began to be plucked off and to be cast away, and they did keep the root and the top thereof equal, according to the strength thereof. Now, I looked this up. This is in the seminary manual, and it says here, like, it has like this little table of what the symbolism is of everything. Of course, decay is sin and apostasy. The master of the vineyard is Christ, right? The tame olive tree is the house of Israel, God's covenant people. And then the wild olive tree, the Gentiles, and so forth. Okay, the roots, it says individuals with whom the Lord covenanted anciently, such as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Roots may also represent the covenants the Lord makes with those who follow him. I might be going outside my lane here, but I think that you could also say that this refers to the main body of, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think that you could probably say the Jews, because they have remained a people this entire time, even though there's been a diaspora and so forth. So what I find interesting about that is that if that's the case, then the root, meaning the Jews, and then the top being, so because you think about the root, that's where it comes from, right? Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Israel, the nation, is where this all comes from. And the root has been here the entire time, and now the top, which I think would be us, like these different branches that are coming in, and the good fruit is starting to be brought forth again. What's interesting is that you have the root and the top equal, and that stands out to me because I've done the videos about how the number of Jews and the number of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are about equal in the world. They're about the same size. And in the United States, they're about the same size. It's just that the majority of Jews are back east in the New York, New Jersey, New England area. And then us, of course, the church, we're primarily out west, centered on Salt Lake City. So this could be a faulty interpretation, but it would be interesting if this is kind of referring to that you have these two parts of the tree that are about equal, at least in terms of number, right? And it's clear that the Lord is doing something right now with the Jews. Number one, you have the Messianic movement that's been taking place since the 70s. And then on top of that, you've had this like accelerated gathering to the land of Israel of Jews. It's supposed to happen. It is happening. And many of them, I think, are getting more excited about religion. Many of them are really anticipating Messiah showing up, which I think is the Lord's way of preparing their minds for the second coming when that happens. So that's why I care so much about their interest in Messiah. Not that we would accept that Messiah, it's just that I think they're being prepared for the true Messiah when he comes. Okay, verse 74. And thus they labored with all diligence according to the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard, even until the bad had been cast away out of the vineyard, and the Lord had preserved unto himself that the trees had become again the natural fruit. And they became like unto one body. Okay? And the fruits were equal. So one body, and the fruits were equal. And the Lord of the vineyard had preserved unto himself the natural fruit, which was most precious unto him from the beginning. Now, this is the part that Hyrum Andrus had pointed out, that the fruits were equal. That's something I think I just like skipped over before, or it just never hit me that that was significant. When you click on the footnote for 1, it takes you to, oh, that's not what I wanted. Well, yeah, okay. D&C 38:27. Behold, this I have given unto you as a parable, and it is even as I am. I say unto you, be one, and if ye are not one, ye are not mine. And that makes you think about what one of the main messages that they've been sharing with us in General Conference is becoming a united Zion people and avoiding contention. Okay. This is being talked about at the end of this chapter, the winding up scene, so to speak, of Jacob 5. Because this is what's supposed to happen before the end. Becoming one body and the fruits being equal. And Hyrum Andrus talks about the law of consecration, how he thinks that this has to do with the law of consecration, and I believe that's true because the law of consecration is a Zion concept. It's attached to Zion. If we were fully Zion right now and had a Zion society, we would have the law of consecration in full. In full. We do have it now. You can consecrate your time, your efforts, your talents, your money, whatever, to the church, and we should be doing that. We should live it to the best of our abilities. But I'm talking about when it is like fully instituted, and we know that that's going to happen in the millennium. So let's continue. It says, and it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw the fruit was good, saw that his fruit was good, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called up his servants and said unto them, behold, for this last time we have nourished my vineyard, and thou beholdest that I have done according to my will, and I have preserved the natural fruit, that it is good, even like as it was in the beginning. Now, this is interesting because in the beginning, if we're going by this definition right here, that the olive tree represents the house of Israel, the roots represents Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Really what we're talking about is restoration, right? Because going back to how it was in the beginning, and that's been another one of the big topics that we've been talking about. Let's see, I'm sorry. So what I want to do, let me show you something. Let's go to the phrase tracker. Okay. I added in a new column. I just put this together today. In fact, let me color these right now so I can know that I've touched on these. Okay, and that I've done a video about them. Okay, so just looking at this without zooming in, you can see something going on here in 2020. If you're just looking at the colors, you can see all across the board in 2020, all these different topics were being hit on. Zion people, Enoch, and of course Enoch has everything to do with Zion because him and his city are going to join with Zion. In fact, there's a very stunning 7 times that he comes up in General Conference in the year 2020. Of one heart, this is a Zion term because Zion is the pure of heart. It's also the one of heart and the one of mind. And that was mentioned a whopping 5 times. When I say whopping, I'm saying compared to all the other years. Look at this big space of time right here that it wasn't even brought up from 2012 to 2015. And you go back in time and it's even, it's just kind of scattered. It's just here and there. There's a lot of white space right here between 2010 and 2019, but then suddenly just a huge spike. A huge spike. City of Holiness, that's another name for the New Jerusalem. Or, sorry, not the New Jerusalem, for the city of Enoch. It's called the City of Holiness. And that was mentioned 2 times. You go back in time and it's not brought up a whole lot of times. The only time it's been brought up more than once in any given year was 2020. You have building up Zion right here, New Jerusalem right here, falling upon their necks. That comes from a scripture talking about when the city of Enoch is joined with New Jerusalem, that we're going to fall upon their necks. The only time that that's ever mentioned in General Conference is in 2020. And look at this. If you're a covenant people, if you've made covenants, you are a Zion people. And look at these phrases here. You have covenant path. That's been a huge thing ever since President Nelson became president. Just in the dark, dark red for all these years since he's been president. Over here for covenant people, you have 6 times. You have a big spike. This time it was in 2021. Okay. You go back in time, it just kind of tapers off, so it becomes more frequent as time goes on. But especially starting maybe 2005 and then with a peak in 2020. There's more. I don't need to tell you, if you've watched General Conference over the last few years, you know that this is a big topic of conversation, is becoming a Zion people. And specifically, now let's look at contention. Okay, because the opposite of Zion is contention. If you're not of one heart and one mind, that must mean that you're divided, that you're against each other, right? So in the 40s, we got 11 times that it's brought up. In the 50s, we got 16 times. In the 60s, we got 32 times. In the 70s, excuse me, we have 37 times. And I just want to point out again, it follows the same pattern as the other second coming terms. There's always this big spike during the late 60s, 70s, sometimes into the early 80s. For whatever reason, the second coming and everything related to it was a hot topic during that decade and spilling over into the previous and the decade afterwards, the 80s. We've kind of talked about that a little bit, why that may be. One thing I think about is that there was the 6-day war, which that was prophecy being fulfilled, because that's when Israel regained Jerusalem, okay, the old city. And that was critical. This is also the decade where the BYU Jerusalem Center was built in Jerusalem, or it was announced, I think, at the end of the 70s, and then it was constructed in the early 80s. And it could be a potential temple in the future. It wasn't built for that intention. The church is not going to change it to that until, possibly, who knows what'll happen. Christ could come at the second coming and be like, that's going to be my headquarters. Things may change. Israel might like us and be like, you know what? Yeah, you can do that if you want to. But the church is not going to just sneakily, turn it into a temple. But I have a whole playlist about it. So there's a lot of stuff to it. So go check that out. The other really important building that was constructed in the 70s was the Independence Visitor Center, which was designed to the exact specifications of the temple that was planned for New Jerusalem in Independence, Missouri. It was going to be a 24 temple complex. They constructed it so that it could fit into that complex and become a temple. Okay, so 6-day war, 2 potential very important temples built at the same time. I think that's maybe what drove a lot of this. There could be more things to it, but those were some pretty big events. Moving on, the 80s, we got 38 times. The 90s, what do we got? 33 times, so it goes down. The 2010s, or the 2000s, I mean, 30, so it goes down even more from the 90s. But then, in the 2010s, we get back up to 36, and then in the 20s, we're already at 17. And look at 2021 with 9, that dark red right there. You could argue that from 2016 on, contention has been a big topic. Avoiding contention. Now, I didn't check the context of every single tally here that I've done. That would have been way too much work, so this is just kind of a rough idea, but it still tells a story. You have the big clustering in the 70s, and then you have another one taking place right now, and it's a pretty big one. In fact, 9 times in a year, that's, let's see, that's the highest of all time, going back to 1942. That's the most that contention has ever been talked about, was last year. And we don't know how this year is going to play out yet. Okay, so this is all just a really long way of saying that I think this part right here of Jacob 5, becoming one body, the fruits being equal, I think that's what we're seeing right now. I think that's what we're seeing right now. And then we were just talking about the restoration, right? We were just talking about becoming good like it was in the beginning. I should have had this ready, but I just thought about it in here. Here you have ongoing restoration, okay? And this is really dramatic because look at this. 2019 onward, we have continuing restoration, ongoing revelation, ongoing restoration. There's like different variants, okay? There's a reason why I have these different columns here. But look at these columns. When you go back in time, it virtually disappears. In fact, it actually disappears. Starting with 1988. And then you go back in time, you don't see it at all. You don't see it at all. And then it just takes off. I guess you could say probably 2019. So, okay, Jacob chapter 5. You have the tree returning to the same state, or just as good as it was in the beginning. So it's being restored, right? You have the Zion talk, one body. The fruits were equal. Let's continue on. And it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw that his fruit was good, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called up his servants and said unto them, Behold, for this last time have we nourished my vineyard, and thou beholdest that I have done according to my will, and I have preserved the natural fruit, that it is good, even like it was in the beginning, restored. And blessed art thou, for because ye have been diligent in laboring with me in my vineyard, and have kept my commandments, and have brought unto me again the natural fruit, that my vineyard is no more corrupted, and the bad is cast away. Behold, ye shall have joy with me, because of the fruit of my vineyard. For behold, a long time will I lay up the fruit of my vineyard unto mine own self against the season, which speedily cometh. And for the last time have I nourished my vineyard, and pruned it, and dug about it, and dunged it. Wherefore I will lay up unto mine own self of the fruit for a long time, according to that which I have spoken. So what is this long time? Is this something to be discouraged about? It's like, okay, so they've gone through, they've done the work, they've gathered everything together, everything's been restored. We have natural fruit being produced again. And now what's this long time that's being talked about? Well, Let's take a look. It takes you to First Nephi 22:26. I actually have this pulled up in another tab, and let's go to the chapter heading here. Israel will be scattered upon all the face of the earth. The Gentiles will nurse and nourish Israel with the gospel in the last days. Israel will be gathered and saved, and the wicked will burn as stubble. The kingdom of the devil will be destroyed, and Satan will be bound. Okay, so it's talking about the millennium. Let's go down here. Let's look at the actual verse. And because of the righteousness of his people, Satan has no power, wherefore he cannot be loosed for the space of many years. For he hath no power over the hearts of the people, for they dwell in righteousness, and the Holy One of Israel reigneth. Because Christ is going to be king during the 1,000 years. You click on the footnote for Satan, takes you to Revelation 20, verse 2. And he laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So going back to chapter 5 of Jacob. So what you have is everything gets restored. The branches are restored, missionary work. They become a Zion people, okay, because the fruits are equal and like one body, right? And then after that, the millennium. After that, the millennium. In verse 77, and when the time cometh, that evil fruit shall again come into my vineyard, then will I cause the good and the bad to be gathered, and the good will I preserve unto myself, and the bad will I cast away into its own place. And then cometh the season and the end, and my vineyard will I cause to be burned with fire. So, now this part may be talking about after the millennium. Let's see. The footnote for good says, therefore let the wheat and the tares grow together until the harvest is fully ripe. Then ye shall first gather out the wheat from among the tares, and after the gathering of the wheat, behold, and lo, the tares are bound in bundles, and the field remaineth to be burned. No, okay, it's still talking about before the millennium. So that is the takeaway. That's the takeaway, is that you have these little elements. First, it's interesting that you have the root and the top equal. My idea may not be applicable, but it might, as far as the top and the roots being equal, the Jews and Israel being gathered. Then you have the one body, fruits being equal, Zion, law of consecration, so on and so forth. And that's a big topic right now in General Conference. And then, like I said, everything being brought back to how it was in the beginning, the ongoing restoration. It's being restored as it was in the beginning, before Israel lost those higher ordinances, the higher priesthood, and just so on and so forth. There's things that are being restored. Let's see. I think there was one more thing I wanted to look at. This is in the seminary teacher manual for verse 74, which is this one. It says, in verse 74, what might the trees becoming like unto one body and the fruits being equal represent? And then the answer, the righteousness and unity that exists among the Lord's people as they obey his commandments and to do his work. See also Moses chapter 7, verse 18. And what does that say? It says, and the Lord called his people Zion, because they were of one heart and one mind, and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. Okay, verse 74 right here. So I feel like this is just another indication. This right here, okay, how this, the frequency of Zion talk, how that matches up with Jacob 5 and the end of the chapter. And if we were living in the year I don't know, say that we were back in 2010, you couldn't really say that. You couldn't really say that. You go back in time even more, you still can't really say that. There's no time like right now where there's such a high frequency and diversity of these words and these terms being spoken in General Conference. Not with Zion people in contention, and definitely not with ongoing restoration. These are new. You go over here, just next to that. It's not really part of this video, but I guess I'll make it part of the video. You have hastening and hasten, starting in 2013. You go before that. Nope, not really. Hasten, yes, but hastening, which is something that's currently happening, no. Very, very sporadic. And then it all just comes to life starting in 2013. So we are at that. Sorry if you can hear that. That's my son getting upset. He has autism. He's playing a video game, of course. That's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.